Hi, it's just me right now, and I wanted to hop on in before the episode would start just to give you all a little bit of a trigger warning because we are talking about pretty violent and sometimes even gruesome and gory things, topics, and specifics in this upcoming episode. So if that's something that you don't really care for, you're not really in the mood to listening or whatnot, we'll see you in the next one. We totally get it. That's why I'm here to give you that. And also, this is the only video portion of this episode due to the guest's current job, work, profession, however you call it. And he asked to have this episode be only an audio format. And of course, we have to respect that. So, again, thank you guys for tuning in. It's a really interesting episode, very, very different from everything we've done, and kind of exciting because it really, really brought out more things that we would like to talk about in the future. So I hope you like it, and we hope to hear from you guys. Here's the episode. We are what? Hi.
Hi.
So obviously that's not Yvette, who you hear on the other mic.
Definitely not.
No, she's very, very busy. She's had like a crazy, crazy September, and she's traveling and doing all the things. And I have this guy right here that I've known since we were in diapers, and
Very, very long.
very, very long. And so I'm not going to disclose his name for the sake of his job, his work and whatnot, but he is in law enforcement in a local agency. That's as much as I'm going to give you, just to give you all why are we talking about this. And we're talking about medicine and law enforcement today, right? Because of course he's in law enforcement. So he's been listening to our pod, all that stuff. He's pretty awesome about it. And I told him, hey, I need to fill up a spot. Want to join? And we'll talk about this a little bit. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about it. And you guys have to work. Like, one of the first questions, or at least one of the first things that came into mind when I was like writing up these notes, is like your work with EMTs. So, you got to go to a scene or whatnot. Like, you guys are the ones that have to call an EMT, or how does that work? The intricacies of it, like you call, like, what is it? Like, I know nothing about that. I just know something happens, cops are there, and then EMTs arrive later on.
So basically, yeah, I think it depends on the type of situation, and it's very fluid from call to call. But most of the times we'll be dispatched together.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get there first, and we need to address it. Sometimes they get there first, and we just kind of back them up. But it depends on the type of call and the type of circumstances for that particular incident.
Okay. So, like, for instance, if there's like a car accident, let's say, like the most simplest thing that I could think of, because we're in Miami and there's a car accident like every time you blink pretty much in the city. So it's like there's a car accident and this person can't get out. So then you would call like EMT, right? I guess.
Well, if there's a car accident with injuries, then the fire or the paramedics will be dispatched with us at the same time. So
at the same time. Okay.
So hopefully we would be getting there at the same time or around the same time.
Okay.
Obviously, Miami traffic is an issue. So getting around that traffic to get to where you're going can be detrimental to your timing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So then I kind of wanted to like use that as an example of what we're going to be talking about in this episode. So it's kind of what law enforcement pretty much has to do with medicine, and like you guys have to like learn a little bit about it or deal with it a little bit. And then I got a few questions for you that I'll throw at you like here and there. So is there like any in your training in law enforcement and whatnot, do you guys have to study for anything like medical wise or anything, like even if it's basic? Like, what do you guys have to do about that?
So we do get training for, I guess you can say, basic life support or basic, I guess care.
Yeah.
Basically to try to keep someone alive or more importantly, try to keep each other alive.
Right.
If there were an incident or if there were something that happened.
Yeah.
We are equipped with AEDs.
Right.
And tourniquets as well. So we can at least perform basic life-saving things, in essence, to keep someone alive until someone with a higher level of knowledge than us can get there and assume care. Gotcha. So paramedics, EMTs, stuff like that, doctors.
Yeah.
So that's basically the training that we get. But yes, we do get formalized training.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I remember you mentioned like this really cool like machine I had never heard of, that it was like for CPR. Like, so you guys,
yeah.
What is that thing?
The Lucas, I believe it's a Lucas.
You blew my mind when you told me that. I've never even seen it. Like I never even knew of its existence.
Listen, if you haven't seen it, it's a good thing.
Okay, no, I
That
know.
means
Yeah,
you've
that's
never
true.
been around
Well,
it. So,
yeah, that's very true.
so yeah, basically the Lucas is a device, or it's a machine that we obviously don't carry it. That's more so the fire rescue. Some fire
okay.
rescues, because I don't think all of them have it,
Okay.
but some of them do have it, where it's a big machine with basically a ball at the end of it,
Okay.
and it's designed to wrap it around a patient who's lying down and provide CPR for you. So it's essentially a ball that pushes down on your chest in the
Right.
same way that you would do it with the palms of your hands
Nice.
to simulate CPR, and basically it's for extended
Like-
CPR types of scenarios.
Right. So like for to make it to the hospital.
Exactly.
Or whatever, right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And then the other question that I would have, like I know we've talked about it because there's some hospitals here, of course. Again, we're from Miami. We live here in Miami, born and raised and all that. There's like certain hospitals in the area that are known for, let's say you encounter like a patient that has like this going through like mental problems. The most famous one that I could think of is it went on national news like several years ago, like that zombie guy, and people were like, "Oh my God, there's
Well, the one
zombies."
eating the face or whatever.
Exactly. Like, what if you encounter some crazy stuff like that? You got to pick up that person and take them to one of these hospitals that are like for that. How does that basically work out?
So basically, obviously, we have the state statute, I guess you can say, which is the Baker Act criteria.
Right.
So if they do meet that Baker Act criteria, which is essentially an involuntary commission, to bring them to a hospital to see a mental health professional, yeah, we would essentially take custody of them,
Okay.
however that may be, take custody of them and then transport them to what they call a receiving facility. There are designated receiving facilities throughout the county or throughout our jurisdiction. But essentially, you should be able to take them to any hospital. And even if they're not a receiving facility, they are supposed to coordinate transport to a receiving facility.
Okay.
So, we try to stick to the receiving facilities,
Right.
but sometimes you just can't, and you're limited by the circumstances.
Right.
The one thing that we have encountered with these particular facilities is lack of bed space and lack of them.
Crazy how there's so much of it that you got to take that into account.
There is so much of it, and I think obviously society is changing as a whole. I think there's been an increase personally, just my personal
it's your
opinion
experience.
is I think there has been an increase in these types of incidents. I think there's a lot of factors that go into it, but there have been an increase of these types of incidents and involuntary commissions and stuff like that.
Could it be in part with these like new drugs that are going on in the streets? Like I know there's like obviously there's still fentanyl and all that stuff, but there's all these other ones that are cut differently, like trying to cheapen the prices and all that. So maybe more of that. I don't know. Like, I mean, I've seen it on the news.
I think there is an increase in that. Personally, I think that's actually a very big driver of these types of incidents, because we've seen an increase in the types of drugs and narcotics that are synthetic and man-made and chemically induced and stuff like that, where now you're mixing chemicals. It's not even like your old school, hey, I'm gonna go cut some cocaine and turn that into a drug. Now you're talking about synthetically fabricated
Like injectable
narcotics,
and all that.
which at the end of the day, if you're putting all these chemicals into your body, I mean, you should know it more than anybody. That's not good, and that can have very severe consequences.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how you guys do it. That's just using that example that went national news of the zombie guy like eating faces and whatever. According to the sources, it was like bath salts or whatever.
Yeah.
Sure. Fine, but like, how do you even approach that? Like as those officers did at that moment, like how do you even, I know you go in teams and all that stuff, but still that person was like a rabid person. That's just insane. When I saw that in the news, I'm like, I can't even imagine that. But yeah, so we do encounter some crazy stuff here in this town. So, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of it. Yeah. Going back to that about the first aid trauma and like tactical medical training, and all that, and tying into these overdoses and whatnot, you guys, I'm sure, see like your fair share of accidents, shootings, violent crimes, all that stuff before the EMTs could even arrive once they're called. But like I was reading up on this thing called tactical emergency casualty care training. So can you like talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So tactical emergency casualty care training, we have a different name for it. We have what's called tactical lifesaver, or TLS, but basically it's responding to combat wound type of wounds or physical impairments. So think of it gunshot wounds,
Okay.
uh,
Stabbing.
stabbings, stuff like that.
Okay.
And basically it's a combination of tactical training as well as casualty care, in the sense that we're trained and we practice not only on the emergency care part of it, but the tactical part of it as well,
Okay.
as far as securing the scene,
Oh, okay.
making sure that our surroundings are secure and able in order to provide that care.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you can want to provide whatever care you want, but if you're still being shot at, or
Exactly.
if there's still threats out there, it's something that you won't be able to provide that care until that threat is neutralized. So part of that, it has taken off. I know you asked about the training earlier. It has taken off, I would say, in the last 5+ years. It's changed a lot. Our training has changed a lot. I think it has expanded significantly. And this is one of the cornerstone trainings that we provide now. I can tell you in my department, it's actually one of the best trainings that there is.
Okay.
Not only for what we do every day, but even for us.
Yeah,
In our
exactly.
personal lives, if we come across this, whether it be an accident, a gunshot, in our personal lives, outside of work,
100%.
there's all sorts of situations where this can apply, and all the techniques and procedures that we learn from that are kind of implemented.
That makes sense.
Part of that training is also intertwined with our active shooter training. Unfortunately, that's something that's taken off in the past couple of years,
yeah, I mean-
just as a result of society and all the
Yeah.
sad active shooter scenarios that have happened in the past.
Yeah.
This type of tactical life-saving training is intertwined with that. And the basic motto being, number one, stop the killing, and number two, stop the dying. So the TLS training is essentially to address the second part, which is stopping the dying. So once we can neutralize a threat and basically stop the killing, then at that point we can start assessing patients, setting up mass casualty collection points, stuff like that, and then administering this type of emergency casualty care, whether it be, chest seals, whether it be
Right.
tourniquets, whether it be whatever it is. And the idea for us as law enforcement is either keep the casualty alive until we can extricate them, get them out of that scenario, or keep them alive until someone with a higher level of care can show up, whether it be someone that's part of a SWAT team or actual paramedics themselves, which are specifically trained to be inserted into those types of zones and scenarios.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's for sure. And even here, down here, it's one of, as a parent, and you're also a parent, like it's one of those things that you have to like constantly be thinking about these days. It's sad, but it's like true that now we're faced to like, crap, we gotta.
It's a sad reality for us, unfortunately, and sadly we have to think about that. But I think an important point to touch with that is, as a response to what has happened and as a response to society in general, there have been changes to training. I think the medical training component of it has expanded, not a lot, because at the end of the day, we're not doctors,
of
nor do
course.
we claim to be. At the end of the day, I don't want to be a doctor, So, but at least if we have the basics to administer those first 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes of care until fire rescue can get there, we're very lucky to have one of the best fire rescue departments nationwide, in my opinion, here. So as long as we can keep someone alive until they show up, I think they'll be in good hands and they have a good chance of surviving.
No, that's awesome. And that's the thing, like when I was talking about this topic with Evie, like bringing it up, like writing it up and all these things and what to ask and what to talk about, a lot of people like kind of like forget sometimes, and we're not going to go into politics at all. I am 100% not touching that with a 10-foot pole, but you can't deny that like when there's a problem, first people you're going to call is you guys, like law enforcement, right? So if somebody breaks into your house or something like that, who's going to show up first? Law enforcement.
And
So it's
conversely, if there's a problem, the first person you're going to point at and is law enforcement as well, in a negative light. So I think that works both ways.
So in terms to with the training and then life-saving procedures and and all that stuff, has the body cams like been injected into that, like with like changing the training for you guys, or it doesn't affect that at all? Like,
So I would say in general, yes, it has, but not related to the medical portion of it. Because at the end of the day, the medical portion is the medical portion.
Yeah.
So body cam, no body cam, surveillance cameras, no surveillance cameras. It is what it is.
Okay.
There's only such a level of medical care that we can provide.
Right, yeah.
That would be helpful to a patient.
Okay.
And I can tell you, I think for most officers on patrol, I'm not in patrol anymore, but for most officers on patrol, when I was on patrol, providing them the best medical care is not always us providing the medical
Right.
care. So I'll give you an example. I rolled up one time on an accident that had just happened. When it was basically a scooter that ran into a car, and the guy flew about 30 feet. That's how fast he was going. And
You see
basically,
that all the time, and they're like swerving in and out. And I'm
Yes.
like, dude, do you want to die?
so for all intents and purposes, the guy's brains were all over the pavement in the middle of the intersection. So I roll up and you know, obviously our first instinct is to provide
Yeah, of course.
to provide some sort of aid or render aid, even if their brains are all over the floor. It doesn't really matter. But at that point when I showed up, there just happened to be a nurse there that was coming off of
damn.
off of her shift, and she was providing. And at that point, I become useless because
Oh yeah, she knows more.
she knows more. She's trained. She's properly trained. My job is to get that casualty or that victim the most appropriate level of care.
Right,
And
right.
at that point in that scenario, the most appropriate level of care was to let that nurse continue doing her job and provide her whatever support she needs.
Right.
So in that, once we get to that situation, our role kind of changes a little bit.
Yeah.
And we start looking at other things and gathering other things.
Yeah.
So for example, providing scene security and making sure there's security around the scene, there's safety. Because if we're in the middle of the intersection
of
and
course.
she's rendering aid, I need to make sure that she's
safe.
safe and secure as well.
Right.
And gathering information. I think that's one of the few things that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to law enforcement. Sometimes the best aid that we can provide is gathering information in order to relay that to fire and to the paramedics when they get there. Because if I can have some sort of family history already, if I can have the patient's ID ready to go,
100%.
if I can have the symptoms and the scenario of what exactly happened, and I can relay that to fire as they're inbound
Yep.
and as they're responding to the scene, that makes their job more efficient because they already know what they're walking into.
100%.
Because they already have trustworthy eyes on scene where they can start preparing. So if they need to get off with an AED, they know they need to get off with an AED. If they need to get off with whatever specialized equipment they need, we're saving them time from having to run back to the truck to recover those tools.
And you're also working as like a non-biased also like witness of what happened. You're just doing your job. You showed up there and this is what happened and you're relaying that information to them. It's not like a
Exactly.
family member that's picking and choosing what to tell, you know.
Well, not only that, we live in Miami, a very large Hispanic community and population where a very high level of drama is pretty much expected.
Yeah,
So when
yeah.
fire shows up because someone passed out or someone has an AD connected to them or we're doing CPR on somebody, fire is going to ask certain qualifying questions or certain pieces of information that they need that when you're talking to a wife that's breaking down because her husband is being worked on, you know, it's hard to get that information. So basically we try to settle the scene, bring some peace and order to the scene in order to collect that information and relay it to them in the most time efficient manner possible.
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. Any like stories like that, please bring them on. That is like fucking gold.
I'm sure.
Love it. I was just literally, that was gonna be my next question to you. What personal story by the time you have to use trauma or tourniquet in the field? Do you have any other one by any chance? I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I guess we can go over some stories and they kind of come and go as we kind of go. But
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that one about the
That's like-
motorcyclist, that one was a pretty interesting one. That one was actually when I was a rookie, so I was
Really?
brand new. Yeah, I was
Oh my
brand
God,
new on patrol.
You probably had like some sort of level of shock then at that moment.
Not necessarily, because at that point you just kind of instinctively just take over and you just react.
Okay.
You know, later on, once you sit in your car
Yeah.
and everything's kind of settling down, then you start thinking about what happened. But
Interesting.
at that point, at least for me personally,
Right.
you kind of your instincts take over. But yeah, I mean, as far as trauma and tourniquets out in the field and stuff like that, I mean, one particular one that I can think of is actually from several years ago. We were dispatched to an attempted suicide, and long story short, I was a little bit far from the call. So I was actually the last one to show up on scene from my squad. I was on a squad with a bunch of young kids, a bunch of young kids that were all rookies on the department. I was I'm not gonna say the older guy, but I was the most experienced person on that squad. And basically I showed there, I was a little bit far. I'm the last one to get there. So I was kind of late to that party. But I get there and we go upstairs, and long story short, this person who was attempting suicide has slit both of their wrists, and they had a good amount of bleed coming out. They were upstairs in the top bedroom, and they were basically bleeding out in the bathtub.
man.
And I didn't do anything personally myself, but because of the training that we had, the rookies, these kids, jumped right into action. And I got to say, to this day, I was very proud of what they did, because even being rookies and even being, kind of new, they didn't skip a beat. They just got in there. They basically applied several tourniquets to this kid, because it was a young kid as well. I think it was a 16 or 17-year-old.
Wow.
And they essentially saved his life, because he would have bled out, because it was about 4 a.m. when we responded. So fire took a little bit to get there.
Oh, man.
So they were able to keep him alive until fire got there and transported him.
Yeah.
It was definitely a crazy scene and a crazy scenario, because the entire family was in the house. And you can imagine how they were kind of going off. But that's one of those where I think the trauma care that these particular guys on my squad, and luckily they were fresh out of the academy, so a lot of it was fresh,
fresh in their minds,
But they were able to apply it, and honestly, like I said, they didn't skip a beat. They did what they had to do, and in my opinion, they saved that kid's life.
Well, it comes to show you like how important that training can be in those situations like that. And then it doesn't even have to be like, oh, you're getting called for that patient. It could be one of your own, like, that you have to apply that tourniquet to, they get injured
Well,
on the field or whatever.
that's most importantly, and that's kind of what drives us to train particularly harder, or to pay attention particularly more in these types of scenarios, because at the end of the day, we do what we do for the public, but more importantly to us, we do what we do for us. Because if I was the one that was shot and I was being worked on and I had an open wound in my chest, I would want the guy next to me to know how to apply a chest seal, or to know how to apply a tourniquet. So it's most importantly for us and to keep each other alive, because God forbid a situation happens where we are critically injured, whether it be a gunshot, stab wound, a bad car accident, whatever it is. I would want the people around me to be able to keep me alive, because chances are they are going to be there.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And do you guys always, at least when you're patrolling, are you guys always like in groups, like at least of 2, or is it?
We try to stay just for officer safety and just because we're out there, and especially nowadays we're constant targets. So we do try to stay in groups, but not always. A lot of times we are on our own, and a lot of times, I can tell you one particular one that I was on my own was another one when we were. This was actually several years ago as well. It was around that same time with the previous story, and it was a child that drowned. And I remember I was the only one there.
No.
And that has never been like 2 minutes turns into 20 minutes. It turns into an eternity, because I'm there holding a kid that drowned who's barely breathing. And what happened with that is basically we're leaving our typical coffee spot, and my squad had gone their way to their calls or whatnot. It just so happens that call comes out for a kid who had fallen in the pool and drowned, and his family had pulled him out of the pool. And I just happened to be around the corner. Coincidentally, there was also a fire station close to us.
Oh, okay.
So obviously I get there quicker, because we're already on the road, we're patrolling. And I basically turned the kid over. I put his chin in my hand or whatever, and we turned him over to try to get some of the water out. And he basically felt like a water balloon, like carrying a water balloon with how much water he had in his chest and he had ingested. And then at that point, obviously again, it goes back to our limitations as far as medical providers. At that point, it was just keeping him alive. Luckily, he was still kind of like semi-breathing. You can tell he was somewhat alert. Right, very shallow breathing. So we were able to just kind of somewhat stabilize him and do the best we can to try to get as much water out. And then just wait for rescue. Wait for rescue, try to get as much information as possible to expedite getting that kid out of there and getting him to a children's hospital where they can get, proper treatment and proper long-term care.
Did the kid survive?
That particular, yeah, he did.
Oh,
He did. That one actually was a little bit personal to me, because I had just had my kid at that point. So it was kind of a little personal to me, to the point where
Did you have goosebumps?
yeah, I escorted fire all the way to the hospital. And then when I actually followed them all the way to the hospital, and I didn't leave until I found out that the kid was, number one, alive, because he lived dead when they were taking him. I thought he was dead, but I think he did partially stop breathing in the ambulance, and they were able to recover him and get him back. So
it was just like just in the nick of time, honestly, everything that happened. Oh, yeah. So when you're talking about like all these really gnarly things that you guys have to deal with, like on a day in and day out, obviously it's not planned. They're emergencies, they happen, and some of them are really severe and like traumatizing. Others are just the regular beat that you guys have to deal with practically every day. Do you have any, does the agency, departments, or whatever, the government, like provide you guys like with any help, mental health services, anything like that, or you got to seek that out on your own?
As far as us internally, I can only speak for our department and what we do. So I can.
Or maybe like your health insurance covers that for you
So
guys, or
I think
something?
we definitely have different avenues. So I can say that we have a very robust mental health, I guess, awareness within our department. In fact, we have a unit that's specifically therapists.
Oh, good.
And,
Okay.
and people who are provided. And then not only that, if you approach that unit, there's a high level of privacy that goes
Right,
around
of
them because
course.
they don't want it to be stigmatized, or you don't want to be stigmatized by going to talk to someone, with these
100%.
types of scenarios, and not only medically related, but any type of scenario.
Yeah. But at least you guys have that available
Right.
to
So
you guys.
we do have it available internally, and I gotta say that our particular department has put an emphasis on that, and they provide that as a service to their officers because they've recognized the need of mental health services for
Exactly.
police officers or for members of law enforcement. So they've been proactive in providing that. And then not only that, if let's say we're not comfortable talking to them, they can always refer us out to someone who's not a police officer and who's not in law enforcement, because everyone has different takes on things. And sometimes you don't want to talk to someone sometimes you want a completely unbiased opinion of someone completely outside. So we do have options when it comes down to that. And it depends on the individual that it is. And aside from that, we have obviously our health insurance and stuff like that. So if you want to be completely outside of the department, you can go your own personal route of health insurance.
All right, good. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, you guys have to encounter some crazy stuff out there. So at least there's something that you guys could have an outlet maybe if you need it. And then how did you, like when you first started this, I know you've been doing this forever, but when you first started it, how did you handle juggling like that pressure, that adrenaline, that all of that comes into like when you get a call to go somewhere, like how do you handle that fight or flight situation to like go in there and like mentally prepare to like face whatever it is, like and you don't know, like sometimes you go into a scene and you have no idea what's on the other side of that door. So how did you learn how to handle that mentally and like
So
did you just get used to it maybe, or?
yeah, I think it's that. Honestly, I kind of don't know how to answer that because you don't mentally prepare. You don't mentally prepare for anything. You just it gets to a point where you just kind of react, and you hope that your personality is one that can adjust to that and that can adjust to making adjustments on the fly. And it gets to a point where you just kind of do react. You rely a lot on training and you fall back a lot on training, not only training, but your previous experiences as well. So once you start building experience, you can go back to, but that's a very individual type of reaction, and every individual kind of reacts differently to fight or flight. I can tell you, me personally, I just kind of got used to it, and it starts kind of becoming a thing that you kind of, you get used to, because 1 second you're not doing anything, you're just having your lunch, your dinner, your cafecito, your pastelito, whatever it is, and the next minute you're going to something high stress, so I think it depends. It depends on the individual.
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. So is there anything that you guys have to like take into account when it's like approaching somebody out in the street and that person, I mean, is there anything with, how can I phrase this, that like pretty much in training that has to do with like how you could avoid like bloodborne pathogens, like for instance, getting bit by someone, or like they're holding a syringe. There's crazy people in this town, trust me. That's why like I could definitely see this being a scene, or her holding a syringe or a used knife, already that stabbed somebody else and then now they want to stab you with it. Like, is there anything like that in like terms of, how to approach something that could like be effective to you, I guess?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is something that's brought up in training a lot, and I think number one, PPEs, personal protective equipment, that's something that's stressed in training a lot. And even amongst ourselves, we try to stress that internally.
So you guys carry that with you then in your cars or whatnot?
Yeah, we carry different levels of PPE and obviously gloves, basics and stuff like that. But yeah, we do try to be cognizant of those types of risks. However, just the nature of our job is very fluent, and it's very, so sometimes it's hard to avoid those types of scenarios. I can tell you the only way to avoid that is someone who's holding a syringe or a knife. I don't want to get stabbed.
Exactly.
Just simple as that. I don't want someone else's blood on me. I don't want someone else's knife in me.
Yes.
So it is what it is. You try to avoid all that, but there's just scenarios where things just happen, and things just.
And do you guys have like doctors in house that like assess you, or you guys just, for instance, if there is, God forbid, like an accident that you guys are involved in it and injured in some way in that call, do you guys have in-house like doctors that follow up with you all, or is it outside completely?
So we have access. We have access to doctors. I wouldn't call them in-house doctors, but we have access to doctors through Jackson. They provide availability of doctors. So if we had, let's say, an exposure, of Hep or a pathogen or something like that, we would basically go through those. Additionally, we have what's called a departmental safety officer, which is a person who deals with these kinds of things and who helps implement policy and who helps, do the reports related to that and make sure that if you are an officer and you get exposed to that you get the proper care and that, you got to drink the cocktail or whatever they call it.
Yeah, because if you have like some exposure to them, I know that there's like several, like for instance, for HIV, you have like several like injections and like prophylactics that you have to take for that.
Yeah. Which they call a cocktail because it's like a series of injections.
Exactly.
But I can tell you that we always try to bear on the side of caution when it comes to that. But unfortunately, there's sometimes situations
you just
where,
can't avoid it.
like for example, once I had arrested some kid that I had arrested or whatnot. We were actually booking him in the jail. And in this particular jail, the officers stand against the back wall with their back towards the wall, and the prisoners walk in front of you like that. And just out of nowhere, obviously he's upset because he's going to jail. Obviously, out of nowhere, he's walking by us, and he just turns around and he tries to spit at me. And luckily, with my luck, I was actually still in training at that point too. It's just my training
Your
officer.
training was like out of control. God damn.
So, yeah, my training was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, we'll just say it was fun.
But yeah, he went to spit at me. Luckily, I saw him, and I had already a bad relationship with him, so I knew that.
Oh, so it wasn't the first time you saw this
my
guy.
my alertness, my level of alertness was very high with him. So as soon as he went like that to do it, first of all, when he spit, he was very dry. He had a dry mouth, so he couldn't actually work up a hawker. But at the same time, I kicked him away from me. I went like that. I kicked him away, and that caused him to kind of hunch down.
So
and he kind of missed my face, but he literally went to spit at me, which. At that point, that's one of those that how can you avoid that?
Yeah,
you can't really avoid that. You can't.
100%.
So.
Of course. Yeah. Just freaking guy. Like that's and you had seen him so you had interacted with this one before.
Well, no, I'm saying interacting from earlier in that day.
Yeah. Like you had seen him. It wasn't like the first time you saw him in this lineup or
right. I was the arresting officer, so he had been in my car for 2 hours already. Yeah.
Okay, no wonder.
He wasn't the happiest with me, but again, we're used to that. So we're not a lot of people's favorite individuals.
Well, I mean, whatever. Anyway, so what are your feelings towards like integrating, like, well, you kind of went through, it's needed, but do you feel that you guys are in an adequate position right now with how medicine is in law enforcement, or do you think that maybe there should be a little bit more done in terms of training or things that you guys have to carry or whatnot? What do you...
So as far as training, I can say that we do get some medical training. Like I said earlier, it's just the basics of until the big guns can get there, essentially.
Exactly.
So that is.
But you feel like that's adequate enough, or you feel like there should be...
I mean, I think, and this is not specific to medical, but I think a lot of our training should be more. I wouldn't say frequent, but it should be more available. And
okay.
So, for example, our tactical life-saving course, it's one of those that so many people like it and so many people enjoy it that it's hard to get into.
Okay.
I can't tell you our department has made great efforts to incorporate that for everyone. So I'll give you an example. When I went through the police academy, that training was not part of the regular curriculum. Now, for the past, I think 3, 4, 5 years, something like that, it has been part of the regular curriculum. So these rookies that are coming out, they are receiving that training.
Nice.
So I think we are making positive moves in the right direction to providing more training and to making it self-aware. I think the capabilities have also improved over the years with technology.
That too,
So
yeah.
when I say that, it's things like AEDs. You know, AEDs are
They're like more compact now.
right. They're more compact. You can carry them in your car. You know, most police officers have them, if not all.
Okay.
At least the patrol officers,
Right,
not detectives and stuff like that. But patrol officers, most of them will have it or have some sort of accessibility to it. So that kind of increases the level of care that we can provide because now we have that available to
Exactly,
us.
exactly.
Where before 10, 15, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
that technology was not there. You know,
Right,
because
right.
AEDs were not portable.
Yeah. That
Same
makes
thing
sense.
with tourniquets. The awareness of tourniquets has increased significantly where now everyone carries a tourniquet, everyone. So I think we are moving in a positive direction as far as training. I always think more training is good and it's
Yeah.
beneficial.
Yeah.
I think also, especially in the medical field and medical types of responses, I think it's always going to be changing. It's
Yeah.
never going to stop changing because the threats that we deal with change. So,
Right.
for example, the types of drugs that we talked about earlier
Right,
have
exactly,
changed.
exactly.
You know, now Narcan is a thing where it wasn't
Right,
before.
right.
You know, and I can tell you, our particular department does not provision Narcan for us or does not train us on Narcan, but we are familiar with it to a certain extent
Right.
where we can at least knowledgeably talk about it. But you know,
That's really interesting. I would have thought, I don't know, I guess I obviously thought wrong that it was just like kind of like a nationwide like thing, you know, that officers would carry Narcan. But that's interesting to know that you guys don't, not necessarily. Yeah.
so yeah, not necessarily. Not all departments have it. Not all the departments are trained in it and equipped in it.
Right.
Every department kind of makes its own decision. I can tell you that even with medical things like that, like for example, that topic, Narcan,
Yeah.
law enforcement is very, how can I say it, hyper localized.
Okay,
So
okay.
meaning a department here from Miami may not see the same things at a department from Los Angeles or
Exactly.
California or Washington. So the problems that they have up there may be different from the problems we have down here. Therefore, the trainings and stuff like that will be different. So I can tell you from experience that the opioids, even though it is an epidemic, in my opinion, and it's nationwide, it has not hit down here the same way it has on the West Coast and in other areas of the country.
Yeah, and like Philly is a
Right.
big one, you know, Philadelphia.
So luckily we haven't seen as much of it down here. So I think that's one of the reasons why probably it hasn't gotten to that level where every officer needs to be provisioned with it. Liability obviously is the
Yeah,
other thing
yeah, of
because you don't
course.
want a bunch of officers going around stabbing people with Narcan, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
because even though we're doing the right thing and even though we're doing the good Samaritan thing, we live in a litigious society where they're going to try to point the finger at us because that's the new thing. Everyone wants to see cops go to jail. So that's just the society we live in. So,
Yeah.
so I think that kind of plays into it as well. But yeah, the opioids is an issue. I think the types of drugs are an issue. Fentanyl's an issue.
I was going to ask you, which ones do you have you in your experience seen more of? What type of drug out there in your calls?
I mean, it's varied. I've seen kind of most of them. I've seen kind of most of them. But what's most prevalent, at least from down here, is just the simple, you know, marijuana and stuff
okay.
like that, and the party drugs. We see a lot of party drugs and
Yeah, like
pills
pills,
and
right.
and the abuse of prescription narcotics. You know, we see a lot down here. So again, that's something very hyper localized, and it depends on what area you're in.
And I mean, it makes sense. Like the party drugs
Right.
totally makes sense for him.
Right. I mean, look where we are.
Exactly.
Party capital of the world.
Pretty much.
So-
Like I could see that definitely for like here and like Vegas. Vegas is another one that I could definitely see that for and whatnot. So
Right.
that makes sense. All right. Well, yeah, this was a good talk. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Not a
I
problem.
mean, it's one of those takes that's like, oh, people just think, no, you guys just have guns and that's it. You're just there with your guns. And saying, no, there's a lot more to that. You guys have to like train for a lot more things and just
Of course, but then when we do show up, everyone wants us to be everything to everyone,
Right.
You know, because we got to be a therapist to someone who's having a mental health break.
Yeah.
We got to be a therapist to each other because now we have to take
Right.
care of each other as well.
Right.
We got to be a doctor because someone who's not in a critical situation. I gave you an example of that. I went to a call years ago when I was still in patrol. I went to a call where it was in a church. It was in a very large church, and an older male passed out. You know, he just passed out, and he was passed out and he wasn't feeling well. At that point, it's not really a critical care scenario. Again, it goes back to the screaming Hispanic wife freaking out. So at that point, I get there, I assess the situation. There was very little I can do because I don't have probes. I'm not a doctor. I can't take an EKG for him.
Right, right,
You know,
right, right.
like that's just a limitation that we have. So I just go back to gathering information.
information, yeah.
And the wife is freaking out. Oh, why aren't you doing something? It's because I can't do anything. I'm the paramedic. Oh, why are you even here then? All right, well, the paramedics are coming. We're here because I was the closest one. And if this guy passes out and we need to start CPR, you're not going to know what to do because you don't know how to do CPR, you know? Or if his heart stops and now we got to transition to an AED, guess what? I have an AED and I know how to administer an AED, you know? So it becomes a bit of a situation where you try to do the best you can, but people sometimes don't understand that, you know, they have false expectations of to what we can and can't do.
But that's the other thing. That's exactly it. A lot of people don't know like the extent of what you can and can't do.
Of course.
You know, and that's the thing. Like a lot, like in that scenario, she thought you were like, you could do everything at that point. And then there's other people that at that scenario, they're like, well, why are you even here? Where are the EMTs? You don't know how to do anything. But it's like, you can do something. Like if he's not breathing or something, you, like you said, you have the AED.
And they may not see it like that because one of the specifics, I don't know why I remember this particular call, even though it's kind of stupid, but I remember those particular call very specifically. One of the things that she tells me, she said, oh, why are you asking me for his identification? Because I asked him for his driver's license. Oh, he's having an episode. Why do you need his ID? You don't do anything with it. I'm like, listen, lady. And I had to explain it to her. I'm like, listen, lady, first of all, you need to fucking relax. Okay. Second of all, you need to give me his ID because I'm trying to facilitate the process of getting him booked and input into fire rescue system.
Right.
Because the faster they can get his information into their little tablet, the faster they can administer aid and the faster they can get him transported. So you may think I'm not doing anything or I'm being a pain in the ass asking you for this information, but
that's critical information.
That's
to help
critical
everything
information to
go
help
faster.
flow the process and to get him out of here quicker.
Yeah.
You know, so
I mean, it's ID. That's basic. Like it.
exactly. So it's not. I'm not there to pick on you and to make your night worse. I'm there to try to help you and to try to facilitate the process. Why? Because I've done this before. And I've been doing this for. And yes, he's never passed out in church before, but I have seen this before, and I'm just trying to facilitate the process to get him the most expeditious care possible.
Yeah. Okay. And then I was going to ask you, how long have you been doing this for?
So sworn law enforcement, probably 10 years now, 10-ish, give or take.
That's crazy. And then I know that you have some knowledge of IT and all that. So then that you've been able to like implement that, and which leads me to that question. What do you think of AI coming into all of this with you guys, with EMTs, or do you think it could help in any sense?
So I think it may be able to help with the routine type of things, and it'll help in narrowing down or making some diagnosis speedier. I think AI is, number one, very misunderstood because it's very new. And I also think AI is not the end all be all. AI is still very, very wrong in most situations, you know, and I mean, very simple. You can Google AI hallucinations, you know, and you'll see a lot of research that has been done for things that are just simply wrong. So I think it cannot be, it can be trusted to a certain extent, but it needs to be verified, and it needs to be used very delicately, I guess you can say. It needs to be verified, whatever information you're getting, because it only depends on, it's only as good as the information you put into it.
Exactly.
You know, so I do think AI, and this is not only in the medical field, but in general, you know, I think AI is going to be a big game changer for a lot of things, but I don't think it's going to be a showstopper. I don't think people are going to lose their jobs related to AI. Kind of like when the internet first came around,
100%.
you know, that everyone was crazy saying, oh, the internet's going to replace everyone and everyone's going to lose a job. No, it's going to alter the way people work, and it's going to change the way people work. I mean, we can see that already, and I can talk about it from the IT side. Those skills are becoming very sought after now, and not necessarily the skill of implementing it or developing it or whatnot, even though those are highly sought after, but just the simple skill of learning how to use it and learning how to prompt AI to get what you need out of it.
I heard that there's like a word for that now. It's something engineer or whatever. I don't know. I was just like impressed that there was even like a word for that, for like people that are experts at like prompts, you know, to give AI.
Because there is a way of structuring a prompt to get what you want out of it, and to asking the right questions. I mean, going one step farther than the AI and going a little bit separate from the AI, look at big data as well. Big data is a field that's kind of up and coming. It's not as sexy as AI because obviously we have.
And what's big data?
So big data is essentially large amounts of data and statistics and stuff like that that you can put into big, what they call data warehouses or data lakes. You can aggregate all that data and you can do a lot of, I wouldn't necessarily say manipulation, but you can massage the data in different ways to get information out of it and to draw conclusions out of it. So I can tell you, I can tell you that's a huge, going back to the law enforcement kind of component of it, that's a huge thing in law enforcement right now. As far as predictive analysis and using data to kind of formulate predictive analysis. And honestly, I think that can be useful in the medical field as well.
Oh, no, 100%.
Using data because, if 9 times out of 10, someone comes and they have 3 out of 4 symptoms, and 9 times out of 10, it's the flu.
Right?
No. You can use that in combination with AI to put that together and diagnose a flu 90% of the time.
I mean, there's so much of statistics that goes into medicine that would be incredibly useful.
Right. Right.
And I think that's one of the things that people are like mostly scared about when they hear about all these breaches and these hacks. Like, for instance, like the Ancestry.com stuff, the 23andMe, whatever, that everybody's like, oh my God, what are they doing with like our information, our, DNA and all that stuff. And it's like, hey, well, because they collect, that's pretty much what it is. Like they just collect all this data, from all these people that submit their DNA.
And I mean, I'll tell you, that's a whole different podcast episode.
Oh, 100%.
Now we're talking about cybersecurity, and that's what I work in now because I'm a detective, on the cyber side.
Okay.
So I deal a lot with the breaches and the compromises, and it's shocking the amount of data that's out there. And the thing is that if it's not secured properly, if precautions aren't taken, it's a very shiny gold mine for bad guys to get into and use it to whatever extent they deem necessary.
I just because I had seen it, like I think in the recent news, like 23andMe, like their whole board of I don't know how many people like resigned all at the same time. So people are like, oh my God, what are they doing with their DNA? What does that mean? And I'm like, okay, well, it's a lot.
Think about it this way: if you can combine, let's say, AI with data breaches for medical records and stuff like that. Don't think it's impossible to get your own doctor or what you think is your own doctor to call you and tell you, hey, you have this diagnosis using AI generated voices. Have your own doctor call you and tell you have this diagnosis and you need to schedule emergency surgery and you need to pay a $5,000 deductible to schedule an emergency surgery, and you need to wire it to a bank account in, pick your third world country. And guess what? A lot of people will fall for that. So now they've been victimized by their quote unquote doctor in order to send money. So
that's
and that highlights a very large, a bigger issue with AI and fraud in general. But think about how it can be used when your medical records are online and when your medical records are
because they'll use that as proof of like, then how do I know this?
Exactly.
If I'm not who I say I am, then
and at that point you're using exactly what the bad guy uses on a daily basis, which is playing on your emotions. Because if they call you and tell you have cancer and you need emergency surgery like yesterday,
then
he's not going to send the $5,000.
Of course. No, I hear, take my money.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
So I think, again, it's a whole different podcast.
Oh no, that's a whole different episode. Yeah.
But think about the consequences of that. It's just a quick seed that we can throw in there, to kind of open that that door.
Rabbit hole. Like there are these softwares that it's even one of the softwares that I use to edit these episodes, and they just introduced video AI, and I could input there like saying this, and I pick the person and they say it, and I'm like, this is creepy.
It's very creepy. It's creepy.
I tested it out the other day just for shits and giggles because I'm like, what? How does this even work? And it freaking did it.
I mean, listen, we've done these tests and we've done these trials and we've done all these things, and it is, number one, it's creepy, and number two, it's scary, the amount of damage and chaos that in the wrong hands can create.
100%.
So I think that highlights another thing, and not only just in general, but on the medical side as well. Because again, if you can find a way to spin it with health records and doctors and nurses and stuff like that, it's a scary proposition.
Okay, well, that leads me down another rabbit hole that maybe you're gonna have to come in and join up for another one. Thank you for that. Anyway, thank you for coming, and I hope you had fun.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys liked it as well. If you guys have any questions, any I'm sure you have plenty of concerns like I do now. So not concerns, but anyways, any other topics you guys want to hear about, don't forget to do all the things that you're doing, and we'll see you on the next one. Toodles.